Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Justin Tudor, Justin Tudor from Keller Engineering, president of Keller Engineering. Has been active in the industry for years and years. Wonderful human being. And today's topic is going to be, he's the first engineer I've had on. Today's topic is going to be about best practices, lots of educational stuff. Really going to dive into, how procurement works and tendering. And no, I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about disasters, all the things that can go wrong when you have a big, expensive make or break construction project. Justin, thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. I like doing the occasional fun one where it's just talking about the stuff we see sometimes.
Absolutely. And we definitely, as managers, we see a lot of things. I had an interview actually today with someone, and I asked that question sometimes, like, what's the worst project you've ever managed? And it was great hearing these things because I feel good because I'm like, oh, good, I didn't have to go through that. But like a water main, 16 feet underground, rusted out, full of holes, whole buildings cracking, like, yeah, good stuff. So before we go any further, obviously, we don't want to throw anyone under the bus. Things just go wrong sometimes. So keep in mind, while we're talking about all the terrible disasters, we're not really trying to point fingers. We're just trying to entertain you. So let's get into it. I think the first people we can throw under the bus, is developers. So Justin, you've got some good stories of, I think,
development. Yeah, it's remarkable how quickly you can discover a developer wanted to save 30 cents on a part, or the order of construction didn't exactly line up to how it should have been built during construction. We were recently looking at a building where typical system, fan coils with a changeover between hot and cold water in their piping system. So they had to be insulated, obviously. But during the performance audit, obviously, we were seeing a lot of staining. We opened this up and had to have a bigger look at where the staining was coming. And this was on the ground floors of the pool room and in the corridor down below. We were seeing the staining up. So naturally, we open up some ceilings. We look up and, oh, the staining is further up too after one changeover. And looking up higher and higher and higher. And what we ended up determining happened here was you have to leave a hole in each concrete slab to get your pipe vertically running through the building. And that hole has to be big enough, obviously, for the pipe. And the pipe's going to change sizes as it goes up and down the building, depending on how much it's moving around. But then that pipe also has to be insulated. And that insulation and jacketing is there for when you have cold pipes. You're not getting warm, moist air onto the pipes where it's going to condense and drip down. So you can obviously see what's happening here. Moist air was getting to the pipes, but how and why? And what ended up happening was it was clear that the holes that were pre-poured into the slab during original construction were just made for the size of the pipe, not for the size of the pipe and the insulation.
Oh, no.
So of course, when this happened during construction, the insulator showed up and said, what do you want me to do here? You need to make these holes bigger. This insulation is important. No, of course that didn't happen. They just stopped the insulation at every single floor.
So they left an uninsulated piece of pipe at every slab, basically, and that ruined everything. Yeah.
It resulted in, I think we estimated 8% of every riser was uninsulated. And just every time you put moist air, condensing and dripping down.
And the fix there is impossible because you really have to strip the thing down to the concrete slab, recore a hole. Like, what do you do there? That's the only answer, right?
You're hitting the nail on the head there. We looked at other options because obviously if we were able to move to a heat pump system, we might be able to have tepid water going through that. It wouldn't need the insulation, but then you're throwing out this brand new system and rearranging your whole mechanical room. So anyways, we looked at a bunch of options for them. And ultimately, the board elected to do the option that you're proposing there. Pull out everything, recore, make the holes bigger, and then put in the system as it was designed. But of course, there's restoration, right? Like we're always
there's people's homes on top of that.
Yeah, and these pipes are behind the fan coils, and obviously this is discussed in the performance audit stage, but it's 4 or 5 years before this actually manifests. The pipes have started to corrode. Sections have to be cleaned up and replaced. And we can go back to construction here too. So when you first put these holes in the slabs, the developer doesn't core them in. You put a sleeve in there and you pop it out.
Yeah, you just pour around it, right?
Right. And so, but before you pour around it, developers are going to put cables in the slab. and some of them are going to be fire alarm cables, and then some of them are going to be just water cables. And of course, when you're trying to get around a sleeve, the cable will go right up against that. And so now,
so you had wires embedded in the concrete around the
right next to the hole. And sure, you can see some of them through scanning, but FA, like fire alarm cords, are not easily scannable. And so you kind of figure it out as you go. You warn people as much as possible. There's not another option. It's not like a hole that you're designing to put in the slab. That hole is going to go exactly there.
That is an insane amount of work for one lazy guy just being like forgetting to basically make a wire hole. That's what that is.
It like an error, and then somebody saying when it was obvious it should be fixed. The right time to fix it was when the guy showed up to insulate the whole pipe and couldn't only insulate 92%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll give you a similar, like, it's crazy because we have a building, I won't name names, but we got a building where they put in balconies. It's a wood build, and they put in the really, really cheap particle board under the balcony footings are screwed into that, and underneath is the actual framing. And they put the Duradeck or some other system on top, like a vinyl sheet, whatever you call it. You're the engineer. And they didn't put, when they put the balcony footing in, they drilled down, but they didn't put any type of sealant on it. So water just started getting in there. And those particle board floors they turn to like black mush when they get wet. It doesn't take long, but it's like, get 5 minutes of being wet. It's like cardboard. It just disintegrates. And so when I took over the building, I was the second manager at that building. It was the developer, then, they had a manager, then us. And I was getting complaints that the balcony railings were moving. And I'm like, uh-oh. So I go up, I check a few units, and sure enough, like not a little bit of movement, but like 6 inches in both directions. So like a full 1 foot swing. And worse though, I went to one unit, I walk outside and I hear a crunch when I step down, and the whole balcony kind of sinks down under my foot. And it turns out what was happening is the whole floor, which was this cheap particle board, had disintegrated, and you were standing almost on like a hammock at that point. It was just a rubber sheet and then death below you if you were to like pierce through and fall. So thankfully, that was, the developer was great. They did the fix. It's all good, but like just a super cheap thing. Like they just had to seal those footings, those nails or whatever it was, the screws. And this probably would have been avoided, or build little pedestals or something to put it on. But no, they were cheap on that, and the entire building's balconies have to be redone at this point, and that's millions of dollars.
It's really unbelievable, like how, and that's not necessarily a contractor doing wrong. Yes, they should have sealed that, but things like railings on wood balconies or any type of these things, I really believe, especially in Canada, that we can't be fastening these on a horizontal surface. We need to be outboard of the balcony. They need to be fastened on the face, just so that obviously where you're putting holes, you can't assume sealant on a screw is going to protect the inside.
Yeah, we got weather here. We have weather. Like so it's just maybe the solution was different. Like again, now what they're doing is they're putting these podiums where the actual balcony sits on a little footing so that it's not going to disintegrate the whole thing. But such a small little problem, and it goes by 3-4 years, and it just, the amount of chaos it causes, it's unreal. So. Well,
it's certainly insidious, and we can see that too with like uncontrolled degradation. And I
like that. I really like that term. I don't know. I want to hear what you mean about it, but like that should be the title of this podcast. Just putting that out there.
So I like it. Like it. The where we often can see, it's less so recently, but certainly I want to say 5 or 10 years ago, is like the foundational requirements of condominiums aging was getting in there, and the ability of boards to keep their heads in the sand so long wasn't available anymore when the second roof needed to be done or their garage was falling apart. And the most common like surprise degradation was where everything kept falling apart, like the real disasters. There was a commonality around them, and it was so frequently about a disproportionate amount of unit owners compared to the size of the complex. So if I was looking at a 15-story tower and there were only 4 units on every floor, and it wasn't in the nicest section of town, like it wasn't a luxury building, then it was 30 years of people trying to keep their condominium unit prices low by, we're not going to invest in the elevator, we're not going to invest in and they don't have the tools to do what commercial management do, and they think they can just defer the board members. And as a result, they didn't realize one of their amenities was less neighbors. And if you're not paying for less neighbors, then you're not paying enough. And everything gets out of hand. They don't have the money to do things 40 years on. Their garage is falling apart. And when I think about garages, that's back to that point of like single point water infiltration. Everybody thinks like my garage is bad, but it's concrete. It takes a long time to fall apart. But that's not true. Like once it starts falling apart, you're gonna see it progress. But it also progresses in every dimension. Like it's not like it blooms out. Like 1 square foot of concrete soffit delamination a year from now isn't 2 feet, it's 9 feet, and then after that,
it just goes up, down, side to side. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what you're saying is it's actually really interesting that you brought that up, because like it's something we've noticed just as managers. It's harder to manage the smaller buildings, the building to owner ratio. So I had a building once. It was one of my first buildings, and it was 26 units, but it was almost like a giant house in Maple, and it was luxury everything. So the carpet was twice as thick. The doors were like solid oak. They had a parking garage. They had an elevator. They had an insanely nice party room on the ceiling. They had garden beds in the back. So you had 26 people contributing to an elevator, to a parking garage, and it was a heated parking garage. Yeah. And when they built it, they set the fees really low, as developers do. And we had our first reserve fund study done, and we're like, hey, the fees need to like triple, because there is no way, like if each of your doors is $8,000, you are going to have a problem at some point. When these things go, you're not paying cheap prices. And of course, they didn't want to do anything. The board president revolted. It was a whole disaster. And I'm pretty sure it's still a disaster. I don't know. I'm long gone. But it's those kinds of buildings are super difficult because you have so few people contributing to a really serious asset. Like if you have a parking garage, you have a fire system, you have a garage door, you've got all of these things that require money. And you always just want to pass the buck. That's exactly what it is. You see a little crack in the concrete, and okay, it's a later problem. It didn't help that these guys were like in their 80s too, and so there's like, I'll be gone. It's fine. Like I don't want to deal with this problem.
It's remarkable how much the board members will advise you that their life insurance plan is dying before their reserve fund comes due.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for the future people that are going to buy in here. That's really kind to you.
The other thing that I've noticed in terms of like foreseeable disaster is not just like whatever. We could spend all day discussing shared amenity spaces and how problematic they can be to manage and run, whatever. But what is like a telltale for me is like there's this ability where an amenity space is a separate condominium that's owned by the other 2 condominiums. It almost seems to give permission for those separate condominiums to ignore this because nobody is really feeling like the owner. They're feeling like part of the owner, and that is a predictable deteriorating asset when it gets its own condominium. I have a flag out for those when they come up.
Yeah, you without the ownership thing, I agree completely. Like even when you do have ownership, you try to ignore problems as long as you can. Like, oh, that pipe is about to burst, but it might not burst today, so I'm okay. When it's something that's completely outside of your sort of day-to-day realm of what you're responsible for, it doesn't exist anymore. And the worst ones are the ones, again, we won't dive into shared facilities because you're right, that's a whole other day's worth of conversation. But 4 condos are sharing a road and sidewalks, and you're like, oh, come on. Like you just know. If you saw that and you didn't see the street, you can guess predictably that street is going to look like trash because it just will, because no one's maintaining that thing.
And the worst is like you'll run into some in that regard, and sure, it's all by proportion, but one is an accountant's office and one is a physio office on a commercial condo, and the other guy is a snow removal operation who is driving massive trucks up there. It's like, no, it's a third. We're splitting it.
Yeah, it's fine. It's exactly. So you get buildings, you're right, where people just want to pass the buck and push things off. And like for someone whose life largely consists of keeping water where you want it to be, that's a problem. I get that. But like what I've seen, and I want to know your opinion on this, is where boards go in the opposite direction, where they say, hey, we got a problem and we're going to fix it. And we don't want the advice of an engineer. We don't want, like, we know what we need to do. I have some great examples of that, but I kind of want to hear yours because they're going to be much, much better.
Yeah, there's like an inclination of, I'd say I'd put it in 3 categories, that they think something is simple enough that they can handle it, right? Or they really trust the provider that's in front of them
Yeah.
as that they're going to work on an independent basis, or they just are trying to save money at all costs. And I think they can all fall into different categories. Like the obvious one on the you think it's simpler than it is uh, rain screen drainage envelope systems where
Yeah.
you just hired somebody to replace the caulking, right?
Yep.
So you have this many joints, or you want to recaulk the windows, but in reality, the windows are aluminum framed and they're butting up against masonry, and they have a bunch of internal metal to metal mullions and a bunch of glass to metal connections, and you need to
And
make
you're
sure that you're
trusting
comfortable.
Doug's window cleaning to do this $100,000 job for you. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not even Doug's window cleaning. It's just Doug with a rope sometimes. And it's not even Doug. It's Doug's nephew that's going to be out on that rope.
I
And,
hate
and,
Doug's
and,
nephew.
and they say stuff like, oh, it's cocky, right? It's fine. I'm not like, it's going to be fine. But then they'll go out there. They'll, in the absolute worst case scenario, they'll just caulk over top of everything that's there and not do the right work, even though
Yeah.
they said they were going to. They'll only do part of it. They'll leave the bad stuff, take off the good stuff, or they'll seal up things that shouldn't be open, that should be left open, and that can feel well intentioned, but there's no ability thereafter. And they also know, like, an engineer isn't going to drop and inspect every piece of caulking when you engage it, or even your project management professional isn't going to do that. But at least there's a way to set up a standardized mock-up check and performance check, and those are often kind of overlooked.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think you mentioned a few of the causes. Like it seems easier, and there's a guy in front of you who's claiming that this is not a big deal. I can fix it. And you pair those two. Like you've got Doug's nephew telling you, like, hey, this is an easy thing. I do it all the time. And you've got a budget that's in, catastrophe air like realm.
Mm-hmm.
And you take those two things, the board of directors, you're like, yeah, well, I want to trust this guy. I want to trust him, and he's telling me to trust him. Why shouldn't I trust him? And then of course you may not see a problem for 3 years, and it's maybe not your problem anymore because you might be gone or not on the board or whatever. And it's a very powerful incentive for you to cheap out in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
that's, again, managers are good at telling boards not to do that, but sometimes it's not the manager's choice. The board just says we're going to do it. And that's a problem though, because you get a lot of unqualified people just saying, yeah, like this is simple, I can fix it. Like I know how to fix an elevator, that's fine, I got a wrench.
Yeah, and I think too, like it can get extra complicated when you're dealing with uh, things where the board really needs to pay more attention. That there's no way to, you can't put decisions on performance onto property managers, nor can your consultant pick the color for you. I'm just using color as a perennial example, but there's always something, right? And the amount of times is certainly increasing in propensity here, where we're either going through the Terrion process, where it's so important that the board actually understands the decisions that are the trade-offs of some of these items, because they're literally negotiating with their asset. Or if we're trying to figure out what window styles that are going to be in the refurbishment project, or if we're trying to like weigh the options. And it's increasingly common for boards to be on Zoom, cameras off. And that can't be, and that's a way to get into a disaster of just stalling a project or just delayed decision making sufficiently that it can hurt the building. And I'm hoping I'm hoping that we can get out of that trend, but I'm worried it's pushing a little bit closer that way.
Well, like I said, it comes down to, for a lot of them, it comes down to budget, and it comes down to just not, if you're dealing with 5 problems and someone comes to you and says, we've noticed this major problem. You've got water dripping down the side of your garage, and, we need to deal with this right away. Most people's instinct is just be like, I'm busy enough. I'm a
Yeah.
volunteer. I've got 5 other things going on. I don't have the money, the energy, the capacity, anything to deal with this. Let's just kick it down and not deal with it right now. And when we have some energy, we'll deal with that. And I think that's the problem, is that sometimes the one you say that to is the bad one. That's the one where like this becomes a multi-million-dollar project because it wasn't addressed on time. I have a terrible example, one that I'm dealing with now, where again, it was a developer one, but the developer put in a scupper on another wood build. It's these wood builds. And
Yeah.
it leaked. It leaked the wrong way, and it damaged a lot of things. But it was invisible to the homeowners. They couldn't see it until it was too late, essentially. So what we're left with, and we're past the Terry on point, is literally like over probably $2 million worth of damage. Like it got down to the structural joists, which are all wood, and it's again this isn't quite a great example because we're talking about where they're kicking it down the road, but you know at the time they had a management company who probably saw a little bit of a leak and said, okay, well it's coming from the roof, but we don't know where, and let's try a little fix and see if it leaks again. And it doesn't leak for a month or so, and then it does again, and it's just a spot, a little spot.
Yeah.
You don't think much of it because it's not you know it's not the big problem I'm dealing with the front lawn or the trees that
Yeah.
got pruned wrong or something wrong. But those little spots of water that never went away behind the ceiling was a ton of damage happening slowly over time. And rather than tearing everything apart and going to find a little tiny problem that looked small, they didn't. And I don't blame them, but boy, is that a big problem now.
It's it's it can be the obvious example here too is like people doing crack injections, and it turns out they were doing it on a post tension slab, and they've absolutely made things completely worse. And there's other times too, like where I always think of like whenever I tell myself, oh, I can carry this all, what I'm actually saying is I should make 2 trips and I should stop and do that. And like people can see when they're not paying enough attention to the right decision. And I can see that. And when it spirals out of control, I can see that often with insurance claims or insurance losses, where it just feels like, oh, everything's gonna be fine, right? The insurer's there, the adjuster's there, everything is fine. And a contractor showed up, and the scope of work is all there, but it's nothing. It's just a hope that everything will be returned back to normal, especially in an insurance state. Like it's a loss recovery. Everything should be put back to normal, and there should be people to hold the process through. But too often with condominium, it becomes decisions that are unit specific, and now unit owners are trying to have input, and they're having input with the contractor on site, and the contractor may have asked for a deposit because the adjuster isn't caring too much about the Construction Act on holdback or caring about CCDC contracts. And the scope of work was as small as 3 sentences, but also as large as a 200-page insurance document. And once those start going bad, because everybody hoped everybody would be good enough that they wouldn't have to pay attention to it, they are just absolute disasters to unwind, because they happen all the time. They work out all the time, but it really is a kind of let go and let God on some of those.
Well, like I said, you're dealing with people it's a volunteer board of directors and an overwhelmed manager who may or may not be qualified, to run the place they're running. Of course, they have oversight, and most managers are very qualified, but we have a manager shortage. So junior managers are getting bigger and bigger portfolios, and over time they're going to learn. That's understandable. It's like any industry, but you do have these situations here and there where you don't have the best team in place. You just don't. And some, not to say anything bad about any other companies, but there are better management companies and there are worse management companies, just like there's better boards and worse boards. And if you get the wrong group of people and something goes wrong, it's very easy to just hope for the best. And I mean, this podcast is all about the times where that doesn't happen, where things go horribly, horribly wrong, because that's just not always the way the world works. Sometimes things go wrong, and it's the worst case scenario. And I'm sure, like I said, I've seen a few of those already. I'm sure you've seen a ton of those. We don't have to go far to see buildings that are just looking at major special assessments because someone didn't look at the leak in the parking garage for a really long time and it got out of hand. Or if you go down to Florida, there was the horrible case of Surfside where they just pushed that off indefinitely, and there was politics and infighting, and eventually a building came down and killed people. It's a horrible one, but
it really is
nothing like that here.
Of errors. Yeah, and you can see it everywhere. And I was speaking with John DeMarin on the ACMO certificate course for new buildings last week, and the thing that's obvious is, and just specifically to managers here too, is like there's so much on the plate of first year managers in that first year. The idea that they're also going to be tasked with being the designate on these carry-on files. Like, yeah, make your engineer the delegate. That's fine, but don't assume that your decisions are done. Like they're just the person giving you the information and the ability to make those types of decisions. And it's a long process. And I wish when I look, I think putting up your hand and being a board member in an early building is a hard job too, right? I just wish there was a little awareness that one of you, two of you have to be totally invested in making sure that you're going to pull your hair out or whatever's left of it, because it's a process getting through the Terrion, and we need boards to step up. They can turn into disasters too. Like even on the small scale, we'll do a performance audit. I'll do a chain drag through the garage, just a sample version. I'll say, boy, there was a lot more membrane delamination than I expected in a brand new garage. And yeah, we need to do an expanded survey, and we might want to do a few adhesion tests, right? We might want to do a cut test. We might want to delve into whether this $500,000 membrane that's brand new should be replaced. We're in the warranty stage. Let's do everything, right?
Yeah.
And the board's like, no, we don't have $20,000 for this right now, because they don't, right?
They don't. That's the thing. It's but that money's not there yet.
We're screaming, the manager's screaming. It's like, guys, no, you don't know that this is the time to do this. Like, you can word everything you want in the PA right. What you want to do on the condo side is prove that it's wrong, that it's defective now before that first year, and then your entire life is easier. Well, why do we have to prove it? Why is it the developer's fault? And it's like, you have to be ready to keep doing that education, but sometimes no matter how much you do it, it's like, no, it's too expensive. Things will be fine. And I can't believe it. Those can spiral into just 7-year fights about something that was entirely avoidable.
That was preventable early on if someone had raised their hand about it, raised the red flag. No, absolutely. And it's not just new buildings, like even in older buildings, you're dealing with an overwhelmed board management. Like I've got a building, they're doing an EV installation, and that is just a bugger of a project, because it involves lots of surveys, lots of like really intricate details that concern a lot of owners. And my manager is just like, that's what they're doing now. That's a full-time manager, and that's a good chunk of what they're doing. Then you throw in, the other projects that are on the works, the leaks that happen from time to time, the crazy owner that's coming down complaining about her cat, and you're at your maximum there. And then, like I said, you see a little spot on a ceiling somewhere, and you're like, I just don't have it. I don't want to do it. Like, I don't want to stay till 8 o'clock figuring. I don't want to rip up walls because this might be nothing. And the board members are on side. They're just like, yeah, it's let's monitor, let's see. But sometimes monitoring and seeing is fine, and sometimes you have uninsulated pipes and concrete slabs surrounded by wires that you're going to have to deal with at some point.
I think just to put a button on that, monitoring is a plan if you know when you're monitoring. If you say monitoring and hope that someone looks again, that's not monitoring, that's hoping, right? But monitoring means I'll be back in 2 weeks.
Passing the buck, exactly. Yeah. But there's such a strong incentive on tight budgets and overworked managers and volunteers boards. Like, it's just you're going to get a lot of people doing the right thing and investigating everything they see, but you're just going to get a ton of the other stuff too, because it's just all of those incentives are pushing everyone in that direction. And here you got an engineer saying, hey, we should spend money and investigate, and everyone kind of looking at you saying like, yeah, you just want our money. Like, you don't care about my building. You just want to take money for investigations.
My good colleague Sally has a really good sentence where she says, it's really inexpensive engineering to design a very costly repair, but it's expensive engineering to design a low-cost repair. Right. And sometimes like elegant solutions that are easy and can be applicable take a lot of engineering to do, but it doesn't, because it's not the first step, it doesn't look like that.
Well, I think most managers are on side with that. Like, most managers understand the importance of having an engineer. And plus, like, when we're doing major projects, it's you guys, it's the engineers that are supporting that and project managing. So like, it's more, I think, just, overall, when you've got lots of things going on and no money, for someone to come in and say, hey, let's go look at your membrane because there's a little piece coming up here and it might be a bigger problem. You almost want to say, let's not. And like you said, with your new building, like, something that could have been investigated and figured out early was just skipped because of that. And especially when you're like dealing with membranes in garages, also it's difficult because sometimes, the wall of a garage 6 stories down or something is leaking. Well, how the hell do you investigate this? Like, it's a lot of work just to figure out if something's wrong, right?
Yeah. So, and even if you can't come up with a repair, will it be the right one for there? It's remarkable. And no matter what you do in a garage, in a membrane, or there's so many cars that have to drive by it that aren't going anywhere. And everything, restoration, new construction is for cowards, really. It's all trying to fix what they messed up, or the progress of time where the hard work.
Welcome to my life. Yeah, no, that's what this industry is really. It's your like as listen, we've had a building boom over the last 15, 20 years, but those buildings are going to get older. And like, even in my portfolio, I've got some 100-year-old buildings that have been converted, but my oldest buildings that are, built as apartments or condos were the 1950s. And like, there comes a point where you wonder, like, what's the lifespan of this building? Like, is this something you can keep it going forever, or is this something that is eventually going to have to come down because there's just so much wrong with it? And like, you wonder about these buildings now that are put up that are, 45 stories surrounded by glass. Like, what is the cost of that going to be in 30 years to maintain that thing?
Yeah.
With plastic piping.
We're asking the same questions right now too, because part of one of the practices, obviously, that a lot of engineers do is reserve fund planning. So the job is forecasting that, and it's problematic because it's not going to keep up with inflation. We know condominium restoration construction costs outpace inflation. We know we have to guess what inflation is for 30 years. We have to guess what interest is for 30 years. Those aren't skills of an engineer.
No, definitely not.
But putting the numbers down and putting the best knowledge that we have is available. But somebody writing that these aren't going to degrade over time and don't need any money, like they need to be looking at the whole picture there. But when we come to closing off buildings, like terminating one, it's obviously something that's going to happen. We're gonna see more and more of condominiums being wound up, just because maintenance costs get too high, or maybe they end up being not commercially viable. But I'm not sure how those are going to work out on the reserve fund study side. The Act doesn't allow to start underfunding on the understanding, so the money keeps having to be put aside. I think
we're okay for now. Like, buildings, like I said, Toronto started booming, and Ottawa and Ontario started booming recently in the grand scheme of things. Like, if you go back to the 1940s, Ottawa, Toronto, London didn't look like they do now, and that's within the lifespan of a building. But like, fast forward 100 years, what are we looking at? Like, what are all these buildings going to be doing in 100 years? Like, even the ones that are been put up this year, that's a long time. And I don't, you're right, our laws and everything are set up to maintain these buildings, but like, at some point, I'm starting to see this with my oldest buildings, that becomes really challenging, and it becomes very economically difficult. Like, you're living there, and your maintenance fees are going to be extraordinarily high because you're just constantly replacing pieces of this zombie building that should have died a long time ago.
Yeah, I like to think too that, like, you think of the heritage buildings that we have, right? Yeah. And some of them 300 years old, 200 years old, like that's the super oldest ones. But heritage preservation, like, started to come into fashion like 80 years ago, right? Like, it's not a brand new idea that things are old, but some of these new structures, like, there's not how are we going to preserve this 45-story glass high rise? Like, there's not a lot of literature. Even the oldest parking garage, like external parking garage, is like 1952. So like, what these total lifespans look like, I'm not sure if we've seen them or have a lot to model off of. So
yeah, it'll be an interesting next round of people dealing with all this stuff. And a lot of it, like, these new builds have been a lot cheaper than the old ones. Like, when we talk about heritage restoring, like the older buildings, these are like stone heavy, they're built solid, right? They're not, these cheap ones that go up in a year. And, I know the technology's gotten better, but like, I always wonder, just like, what's going to happen to these like 50-story glass towers when the glass needs to be replaced? Like, that is just an insane amount of money. And, I do window replacements for buildings that are brick with windows in them, and those are expensive. Like, and when you start to see these massive ones being replaced, you're just like, oh God, that's going to be horrible. But again, a problem for someone else, I think.
It'll be like the moving tide that all the swing stages and scaffolding will come out, and they'll start seeing it move towards their condominium out the window.
Yeah.
Roll over them.
Well, Justin, we're almost at the end of our time. Any advice for managers, given what we've talked about? I'm gonna throw a curveball there.
just know your maintenance plan, know your reserve fund expenditures. Maintenance deferred is maintenance avoided. So don't avoid maintenance. Like, you need to maintain these assets, otherwise they'll fall apart in front of you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. And have a good rest of the week.
Right on. Talk to you later.